So the question many people are asking is, how did America become so obese? In fact, obesity is a crisis not just in the United States, but is actually considered to be an epidemic around the entire world. Millions of people are struggling with obesity. And outside of issues like the difficulty of childbirth and the difficulty of being treated for cancer, obesity is probably one of those areas where a lot of people can relate to each other because it's such a hard struggle. It's hard to lose weight. In fact, it almost sometimes feels impossible. Why is it so hard to lose weight? Who's to blame? The food care industry, the healthcare industry, or good old capitalism? Are people actually healthier on weight loss medications or just losing weight? And what's the difference between the two? Why is there such a fight to be at the top of the weight loss chain? We answer these questions and so much more with today's special guest, registered dietitian Shannon Grant-Hailey, and resident panelist Dr. Trisa Job. We thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to do what? Click subscribe. Why is it so hard to lose weight? Why is America so fat, as some people may say? We're excited to have on the virtual couch for the first time with us. We're so excited to have Shannon Grant-Hailey, who is a registered dietitian that specializes in weight loss management and diabetes, the exact topics we're going to talk about today. Hi, Shannon. Welcome to the virtual couch.
Hello. Hello, ladies. Thank you for having me. I am excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. And Shannon is East Coast based. Okay. For
Yes,
all you
yes.
East Coasters out there. Okay. We're a little partial to the East Coast.
Right.
And as always, getting their energy going, Dr. Triss is back on the couch to give us the 411 when it comes to obesity and why is it such a hard challenge to lose weight, America. All right, ladies, let's get into why is America fighting so hard with obesity? How did we get here?
I do know some background about obesity, the history behind it. So, according to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, about 40% of Americans are obese. That's a large percentage. There's over 1,000 genes involved in the expression of obesity. And it has been shown that if someone is born to parents who are obese, they have a 50 to 85% higher likelihood of being obese themselves. So that's just a little background. Like a lot of it is not necessarily in their control, unfortunately. There's a lot of different brain neural pathways that are involved with obesity, one of which is the hormone called leptin. So leptin plays a few roles, one of which is it's a satiety hormone, like it helps us to keep full. And so it's shown that many people with obesity are actually leptin resistant. So we know about insulin resistance, but not too much is talked about when it comes to things like leptin resistance. And so if someone is leptin resistant, they have a much harder time getting full. There's also different neural pathways in the brain. So leptin plays another role in that it will bind to certain neurotransmitters in the brain. And I don't know if you ladies have ever heard of something called like BDNF, but it's called the brain-derived
Mm-hmm.
neurotrophic factor. And so people with obesity have a hard time forming this factor in their brain. And it's shown that people who have higher levels of BDNF, they actually have a leaner body mass. So, long story
Mm-hmm.
short, there's a lot of different things going on in their brain, with their hormones, with their genetics, that even with optimal eating and exercise, it can be a lot harder for them to lose weight. It's not that they're lazy, it's not necessarily, and not all, of course, but it's not that a lot of them are lazy or that they're just not eating good. Like they're fighting an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, right. And are there other factors culturally and to your point also BDNF, it's
Yeah.
also being studied, I think, in terms of cognitive disorders as well. It comes up with that as well. So
Mhm.
you're right. There is a genetic component to obesity, and it's an area of increasing research.
Yeah.
Some people will ask, well, we weren't seeing these issues before. So what changed in the history of the world where these genetic factors or the role of epigenetics is becoming more prominent? And there could be, some people would say there could be some cultural factors. There could be some behavioral factors that have changed over the years. Anything in terms of cultural changes, cultural challenges that you may think may be contributing to the obesity epidemic?
Yeah, I think especially with our children, we're spending a lot more time on screens. Not as much focus, especially in certain schools, on PE. I know for me, PE days, I would go in my gym uniform and spend the whole day in my gym clothes. Now it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily a requirement in a lot of schools, and so for some children, that was kind of like their only outlet was in school. They are not necessarily being taught to be physically active at home. So, that coupled with the extra screen time, we're introducing our children to screens a lot earlier. We have to be a lot more intentional with our habits that we're instilling in our children, especially with social media and this and that. So I think that's a lot to do with it, especially also the westernized diet. um, I'm from the Caribbean, so I'm used to eating more whole foods growing up, that is. When we had like KFC or McDonald's, it was maybe on a Friday night and that was it. Other
I
than
think
that,
every Caribbean household had that
yeah,
tradition.
it was like, and it was KFC was a big one for us.
Right. And it
So
was original recipe because it was a
yes.
little bit healthier than the
Yeah.
recipe recipe.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of children, unfortunately, are growing up in that way. The KFC and the Mickey D's and all of that, that's more commonplace. That's more of any night of the week,
Right.
type of meal,
It's interesting.
unfortunately.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I was recently watching a social media video where a young guy was blindfolded and he was
Yeah.
tasting different fried chicken, and he was able to accurately detect, I think it was 4 or 5 different brands of fried chicken. He was able to
Wow.
detect which brand was which. And I think it was like Church's and Popeyes and KFC, of course, was in there.
That's how
And
often he had it.
my mind was blown.
Guess the chicken for $100.
Ooh, hold on. I don't know. I don't know about this one. Let's see. That's KFC. 100% KFC. Gotta be.
How do you know?
The taste is unique. Very unique. That's Publix. Publix chicken. Nope.
From the smell?
That's Publix. Yes. That's Publix. 100%. Popeyes. This Popeyes right here. This is my favorite. Yes. 100% Popeyes.
You just touched it.
You can tell the way Popeyes make their chicken is different than any of these. I don't know what else you got, but this one is for sure Popeyes.
Okay.
That's Church's. That's Church's. Look. Yeah, that's Church's right there. Look at this. You see the cracks in between the chicken? I can feel it. They have a bigger crack in it than any of the rest of them. You can tell that this is Church's right here.
But doesn't that
Yeah.
perhaps really speak to exactly what you're getting at, Shannon? The fact
Yeah.
that our diet, our westernized diet, has had an impact. And I'm glad that you brought up the concern about children, because I do want to emphasize that this is not just an adult disease, even though
Yeah.
the World Health Organization will quote as of 2022 that 1 in 8 people in the entire world who are adults are fighting obesity, and that equates to about 890 million adults. And when you look
Mhm.
at include the overweight group, because some people don't realize that being overweight also has a risk associated with it. We're talking about 2.5 billion people in the entire world. And with children, those numbers in the same year was about 390 children and adolescents between the ages of 5 and 19 years old. So we're talking
Yeah.
about a multi-generational epidemic. And you're right, the westernized diet has been a hot topic
Mhm.
because especially with the raising awareness about how different specifically American diet is for the same food products that are produced.
Yes.
The FDA just approved the fourth genetically modified apple variety from a venture capital-owned fruit company.
5 breakfast foods that I would never feed my kids. By the way, I have 6 of them. Let's do this. I'm Dr. Pasha, functional neurologist and surgeon, here to challenge the status quo. Number 1, Quaker oats and all of its variants. Most oats test very high in glyphosate, as well as the flavored ones are nothing more than sugar bombs. If you're going to do oats, make sure it's organic and sprouted. We like to sweeten them with pure maple syrup or raw honey. Number 2, Eggo waffles. These contain inflammatory seed oils, synthetic vitamins, which you can't even absorb, cheap sugar made from GMO corn, and aluminum, which is a known neurotoxin. Number 3, anything Jimmy Dean. Most of these sandwiches have BHT, butylate hydroxytoluene, which has been associated with cancer in many animal studies. Not to mention that these sandwiches are ultra processed, which cause us to overeat. Number 4, flavored yogurt. Most of these have artificial colors, loaded with sugar and monodiglycerides, which are trans fats. Rounding out the list, the aisle that should be banned from the grocery stores, number 5, cereal. Do I even need to list the bad ingredients in cereal? Seed oils, sugar, artificial colors and flavors. These ingredients won't set our kids up for success. So let's give our kids the best chance to thrive.
Did you hear about that, Dr. Trisa?
So I'm listening. I was listening to all of what you were talking about, and I was going to say that yes, you're having a lot more people figuring out, and a lot of it is yes through social media, that some of the things that we're allowed to have in our food products here are not allowed in certain other countries because of all the negative associations with whatever chemicals they're using for the flavor, for the taste, for the color, things like that. But on another point, to even build on what that American or westernized diet is looking like.
This is not some kind of spacesuit. It's actually a device used to capture and study the air Sam, who you see here, is breathing out. He's participating in a study at the National Institutes of Health, measuring the effects of ultra-processed foods on the body.
We have this huge category of ultra-processed foods. What we're trying to understand is, what are the mechanisms? What is it about this category of foods that is driving people to overconsume calories, potentially leading to obesity and these downstream consequences?
This is one of the only trials like this that's really ever been done. They are trying to understand the effects of different kinds of food on the human body. But it's really difficult to run these kinds of trials because you have to have such a controlled environment. Sam is living here for a month. He's been here for 2 weeks already. He's got 2 more weeks to go.
While people are here, the main outcome that we're interested in is how many calories they choose to eat. And so we're measuring things like their glucose levels over the course of the day. We're measuring how hungry and full and satisfied people feel. We're measuring how quickly they're eating their meals. We're measuring how they're moving.
Researchers also want to know how ultra-processed foods affect metabolism and weight gain. That's the reason for the breathing apparatus like this one.
When we burn calories in the body, it's just like burning like firewood or something like that. It's combusting energy, but it's happening very slowly. And so we can measure how many calories someone's burning by measuring how much air they're using up, how much oxygen they're using up, and how much carbon dioxide they're producing.
Simple things like being from the Caribbean as well, knowing that in a lot of these Caribbean countries, initially in the years gone past, you would have had them eating a lot more local food, right? We would have more local foods. But in a lot of these same countries now, you no longer have local food. They're importing so much of the basic things that used to be local before. So they're importing from the US their meats. They're importing from the US even things like their sugar, or not necessarily from the US, but they're importing so much of these products that used to be more localized and less processed, less whatever the case may be. So it's not just the American fast food diet that has taken over, it's total influx of the American influence period in the products and stuff that are coming in. And so it's just kind of taken over in a way where it's now hitting like worldwide. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's doing that.
Yeah. Why do you think it's such a fight to get healthier foods? Because it seems like it is that one topic that everyone agrees on. We want healthier foods. We want to support our farmers, even though the farming has changed over the years and there's more concern about pesticides and exposure to certain toxins. But ultimately, I think a lot of people are wanting healthier options, but it seems to be such a fight with the industry. And now we have lab-based meat products. So meat that's produced in the lab that was actually approved by the FDA. Why are we heading in this direction? What do you think is kind of the engine behind giving us such unhealthy food? I mean, to your points earlier also, this is also root for why the American public doesn't trust the healthcare industry, because they think the intention of the healthcare industry is to make them sick. And
Yeah.
it's understandable why a lot of people would feel that way, even though a lot of us healthcare workers also want the same thing. We want healthier foods. We want to be able to have the education, which a lot of us don't have. Shannon is blessed to have that training, but the rest of us, we don't really get that training formally when it comes to nutrition and exercise health. And
Yeah.
so ideally, a lot of providers want to see our patients be healthier. We want our patients to have healthier foods. We want our patients to be able to freely exercise. And that seems to be just such an uphill battle. Why is there such a fight?
I think it's multifactorial. So I think part of it is that we are about mass production in the US. Like we want things fast and we want larger portions of our food. We're just kind of trained that way. So even when you go to get maybe takeout from maybe a drive-through or something, you'll notice like the large drinks are massive. And it's like, why are we even consuming these large amounts of food and beverage? And then when you look at other countries and you look at their portion sizes, it's actually much smaller. But that's actually the portion that we probably should be consuming. But visually, we're so used to these large portions. So I think part of it is that mass production.
We're trained into that American way, like bigger is better.
Bigger is
Is
better.
the
Exactly.
American way, right? Like
Mhm.
whether they talk about like what's a Texas size steak, and
Mhm.
everything about us is supposed to be bigger and better than everything. And unfortunately, they've done really great with marketing to buy into
Yes,
that.
they
And we
have.
have to remember that, there are people whose job it is to have us desire the things that they're producing, right? Whether or not we desire them, they're going to market to you how much you need this wonderful screen TV on the TV that you're already watching, right? Because it's bigger and better than the one that you have. We have people who are professionally trained and very, very, very skilled at their job to want us to want more. So I think that is part of what happens with us here in this American culture. But I also think about the fact that when cigarette companies kind of went out of favor, those scientists had to go somewhere. They went into food. So we have now these scientists who are, their one job in life is to make the food more addictive, to make us desire to eat the things more. So even if it is that it may be something that's good, having excess amounts of it is still not necessarily a good thing. But we just want to have more, and they're just working on making things much more addictive so that we can have more, so we can sell more, because that is good old capitalism.
Good old
Yeah, good old
capitalism.
capitalism. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Especially what came to my mind when you said that was high fructose corn syrup.
Mhm.
It's one of
Mhm.
those ingredients that are just put in
Mhm.
things because it just
Mhm.
makes it taste sweeter, and we don't realize we're addicted to these things.
Mhm.
Salt, extra salt. We want things to taste sweeter. When it's not even like the natural taste of how it should be, but we've gotten so used to things being extreme in that way. So I remember seeing a documentary, I think it was in France, and they were following doctors, and they were actually getting rewarded and like bonuses for their patients' health conditions improving.
Mm.
And it was such a stark contrast to the way it is in the United States, where, we're kind of trained for health providers to kind of just throw medications on things. And for them, they were rewarded for their patients to be able to become off of medications and improve. So it's very different in this country in that way.
That's interesting because when you look at some of the current popular incentives for clinicians, it's leading to its health, but it's a different perspective. So I'm glad that you
Right.
brought that up because it's really like making sure that the A1C is better. But how about we make sure that someone doesn't even have an elevated A1C to begin with, right? It
We're
sounds
not
like that's
attacking
what
the
you're
root
saying.
cause.
Like instead of focusing on chronic disease control, focus on the prevention of chronic disease to begin with. And so most of the incentivized sort of benefits of patient care has been focused on chronic disease optimization, which for a lot of people will include medication as opposed to preventive medicine being measures. But it's possibly because preventive medicine being a measure would be challenging, right? Because we have, as you guys mentioned, the food industry that counters even your counseling in the office. You have the food deserts and neighborhoods that economically just don't even have access to healthy foods. So it definitely would be hard to use preventive medicine or preventive measures as an incentivized or as an incentive for a clinician, just simply because it's such a multifactorial issue beyond what happens in the exam room. The other thing that I'm glad you guys touched on American culture, because I do think capitalism, the facade of wealth, which is what America is supposed to represent, is why there's so much propaganda and marketing that targets our desire for things, using even just the psychology of color and music to control our minds. And I'm glad you brought up the fact of the genetically and chemically modified food also to trigger our addiction and our dependency almost on certain foods. So now we have in the last couple of years, in the last decade or so, we've had the marketing and development of new medications, because this has been a struggle for people for like decades now, where we've been looking for, of course, newer medications to fight the now overwhelming battle of obesity. And so we have these newer medications on the market.
Obesity medicine physician at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School, Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford.
Only 25% of our persons currently in the United States today, December 4th, 2024, do not have overweight and obesity.
So do you think that 75% of the country should be on these drugs?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we do have a problem.
Do you think that we're all in some way going to be on these drugs?
We're starting to look at different use case scenarios, things like alcohol use disorder, opioid use disorder. We also were talking about things like Parkinsonism, Alzheimer's disease. So we're going to see different disease processes begin to come into the mix when we're looking at GLP-1 receptor agonists that get outside of the cardiometabolic sphere.
No more fen-fen.
No more fen. Remember when fen-fen and
I
all
remember
those
that.
conversations? You know, there's a whole generation that have no idea what fen is.
I remember that. Yep.
Sorry.
But no, that
one.
was perfectly fine. And so now we have these GLP-1 agonists that are very popular on the market, initially focused on helping to control diabetes, now have evolved into, in certain respects, weight loss management. So the question is medication first the answer? Is obesity so far gone in the United States that there is no way for us to utilize lifestyle changes to combat obesity?
I don't know. That's the basic answer. But I believe that there's so many systemic changes that have to be made that it would take a whole lot more than just government programs, or I don't know what it would take to get people and the society and all the parts that need to come together to have it be just lifestyle modification and changes. Because if we think about all the genetics and the brain activity stuff, now these are, we know that genes could be present and unexpressed, but what are the things that are going to trigger them to become, there's just so much of it that's going to be reliant on a well if and well if. I understand it being a direct choice, like, we have an opportunity to do this, let's do this because we may be able to make a change here with this. So I can see that as being a reason behind it, but you want to have hope that there's something beyond.
Right. I think finding the food industry, I'm not sure if American citizens, I'm not sure if American citizens have the power to change the food industry. And it would require a complete revamping of the food industry. We would have to collectively come together and utilize our power as the electorate, as constituents. Need I say more?
I'm sorry. I'm laughing because I'm like, come together, come together.
Yes. Yeah,
together.
that
That's the part.
unity thing. Because you would think that this is one thing that we all agree on, right?
Since we
But
all suffer or we all have issues with.
yeah, at some point, right? At some point in your life, most Americans have battled obesity and being overweight at some point. Whether it is for women during pregnancy, the perimenopausal stage, the menopausal kickback, at some point during their teenage adolescent years, fighting hormonal imbalances. At some point, especially for minoritized groups, there is a challenge with being overweight and obese. So what do you think about these new medications? What do you think about these GLP-1s? Yeah, so for the GLP-1s, as we know, they're not new. The use for obesity is new. And so we're now using them off-label for obesity at higher doses. And so we have limited research on that. And also, too, the results are variable. People don't talk much about that. So let us talk about it. Talk about it, Shannon. Yes. So the results are variable, and they also have to be used long term. Like, we're not going to be using this for a month and, have this 10-12% weight loss. But it's supposed to be used long term, maybe 6 months or more. And not everyone will lose weight. Like, some people don't lose weight on it. There's no way to know who it'll work for and who it won't, but some people won't lose weight. Other people have actually gained weight on it, ironically. That's not very talked about. And so for the people who do lose weight on it, though, this medication would have to be continuously used for them to, maintain this weight loss. Once they stop using it, they'll either regain some of the weight or most of the weight that they lost. Up to 2/3, right? Some people up to 2/3 of their higher weight. Exactly. And then because it's not approved for weight loss, a lot of people are opting. You had touched on this, where a lot of people are, I guess, able to purchase it. So it's like this hierarchy of who gets it and who doesn't. It can cost upwards of like $1,600 monthly. So we're not talking about something cheap here. Right. And so you have to stay on it. It's also supposed to be coupled with lifestyle modifications. So, okay, can we talk about that, registered dietitian? Yes. What are you seeing in terms of the consistency of people? Because it literally tells you should be seeing a dietitian and exercising while on these medications. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't, and their nutritional status is taking a hit. So we know as healthcare providers that just because you're slim and just because you have lost a ton of weight does not mean you're healthy. So, there may be skipping breakfast, and then I don't know, that by lunch they don't have an appetite. Maybe they have a candy bar, and then dinner they'll have, I don't know, a little bit of pasta, and oh, you're losing weight. And okay, but if you're doing that over and over and over again, you're missing macronutrients, you're missing micronutrients, you're missing, phytochemicals and antioxidants and
All the things.
all of the things that we need
All.
to maintain optimal health. So that's not thought about much. I'm
No,
seeing.
and I was just gonna add, and not only are they losing weight, they're losing muscle mass too. But go ahead,
Yes.
we'll come back to that in a
Oh
second.
no.
I'm glad you brought that up.
If you
Yes, it's
if
true.
you stepped in, I want you to go full force.
Go ahead.
You're,
Dive
you're losing
dive
muscle
into
mass as
that.
well.
Why is that so important?
Yeah.
Because one, especially a lot of the times when we're starting to use these medications are going to be times, if we're thinking about the women, it's going to be times when we're probably closer to like our 30s, our 40s, our 50s. And these are the times when you're probably hitting perimenopause. So you're having all these other things that are showing up right now. We're already not building as much muscle mass in these cases. We're now losing the muscle mass that we have. And then we wonder why our bodies are so frail at 70, why we can't do the things that we need to do later on. And I mean, I get it. Right now, it's an immediate thing. So I will be honest, every time I hear a patient tell me that, yeah, I'm taking whatever, I said, are you exercising? Are you
Are
actively,
you strength training?
right? Are you
Yes.
actively working your muscles as you're doing this? Because you are losing muscles as well. And that is not a healthy thing for you. I mean, good muscle mass also helps with good blood sugar control too. So
Yes.
there's all these nuanced layers that keep going on top of it. And so as much as I sometimes want to be like, okay, yes, you take the medication. I'm like, really? Do we have to though? Do we really have to? But I'm gonna back away from it for a little bit now.
Yeah, I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head when it comes to what really is health. And that's really what we're saying. And what we're saying is that health does not equal weight loss, nor does health equal a small or low BMI. Having a BMI in the normal range does not necessarily equate to health. Being a slender person does not always equate to health. And we know this because according to the CDC in 2022, 24.2% of adults, to both your points, were meeting the criteria recommendation when it comes to aerobic and muscle strengthening exercise. Only 24.2% of adults. It's a higher percentage in terms of just meeting the aerobic portion. So about almost half of adults are meeting the aerobic requirements in terms of what's a healthy, active lifestyle. So that's 46.9% as of 2022. But to your point, that tells us that the far majority of Americans, given the difference in the two percentages, are not focusing on muscle strengthening. And to your point, Dr. Trisa, a lot of Americans do not know that your muscles have a role in your metabolism. And so having bigger, stronger muscles actually should be a very strong focus, especially for those who are at risk for metabolic diseases like your diabetes. You want to build those muscles. So I'm glad that you brought up that point. But going back also to what you mentioned, Shannon, in terms of nutrition, one of the things that has plagued America is that we are overweight population, but an undernourished population. So being larger in size
Yeah, we're
does
big and
not equate.
malnourished.
Right.
It's sad.
Imagine.
And
Yeah.
it's also the reason why when people are on these semaglutide medications, that they are surprised by certain side effects like hair loss, because a lot of people don't realize your hair is a reflection in most cases of your nutritional status. And so if you're not getting enough protein in your diet, if you're not getting a lot of your micronutrients, you're going to lose hair on these medications. And I know here will stop a whole lot of people in their tracks, because if it's one thing we're not going to
Isn't
do,
that something? They don't pay attention to much else, but if you lose your hair,
we
then
don't
I
care
might have
about
to
the diarrhea, the
reconsider.
nausea, vomiting, constipation, upset stomach,
Right.
bloating.
Right.
But you mess with our hair, you have our attention.
Oh
Well,
my goodness. So yes, I'm glad you touched on some of the cons. So nausea, vomiting, just not good stuff. Diarrhea, constipation. People are really suffering for the sake of losing weight on these medications. So it's really important to talk to your healthcare team when you're on these medications for your safety.
Yeah.
because there aren't many studies on it for weight loss. So you really need to be monitored while you're on it.
Yeah, yeah. And so to give people some background and also to the point we were mentioning earlier as well, we want more people to see people like Shannon when you're on these medications,
Yes.
because there was
Yes.
one study that I think was mentioned by an American Heart Association that showed only 25.1% of people who were on Ozempic not continue to see, but saw a dietitian.
Saw, meaning
25.
just one
It
time
could have
or
been just one visit, right?
that's insane.
Even knowing how critical registered dietitians are to the
Yeah.
journey of weight loss and to the journey, as you mentioned, of balancing and maintaining our nutrition while we're losing weight. And not to mention our fitness gurus making sure that our muscle strength and all those things are good. But yeah, and Ozempic is the one that is approved for it's on label for diabetic management,
Right.
but it's off label for when it comes to weight loss. Or you may be on Wegovy, which is similar to Ozempic in terms of how it works, just a higher dose, and that one is approved specifically for weight loss management. Just to give people some idea of what types of medications are on the market and when they came on the market. So Ozempic, for example, is produced by Nordisk, and Mounjaro is produced by Eli Lilly. So these are the most popular brands of these weight loss medications, but you still also have Victoza and Saxenda, which had been on the market since 2000, are approved by the FDA since 2010 and 2014. And what do you guys think about those medications and how they work? Do you have any experience working with these or patients who are on these medications, Shannon?
I do actually. Again, for some, the results are very variable. We see the people who have lost all the weight and, they're all slender, but some people don't lose any weight. Some people might gain weight, and they just kind of like back off into the shadows. So, it all depends. Again, you have to be on these long term to maintain your results as well. There's compounded versions that are being produced where they're taking the active ingredient semaglutide and they're kind of mixing it with other things. And this is due to the shortage and the cost, where it costs less for the compounded versions. The problem is that the compounded versions you usually don't have to get a prescription for, so you're really not going to be followed by anybody.
Right.
As far as a healthcare provider while you're on it, you don't know how much of the active ingredient is in it. And you're putting your health at risk, but people are getting these things in droves, despite, all of that. So
yeah, and even the original medications, there's still a lot we don't know about them. The longest studies that we have available in terms of outcome are 4-year-old studies or 4 years long studies. So in terms of really, when we talk of truly long-term outcomes, there's still a lot we don't know. We don't know about those who want to use it and go back on and get off of it. We don't know what that does. For the individuals who do not truly have high BMIs, who are on these medications, don't really meet recommendations or the guidelines, we don't know what those outcomes are going to look like. And we also know that, as you mentioned, the continuation rate is really low. Like one study found that with Ozempic in 1 year, it's about 47% that are continuing the medication and drops to 22% after 2 years.
Right.
So even though you can have great outcomes still over 4-year time period, the continuation rate is really low. And Wegovy saw a similar drop in the rate of continuation with the medication. And then we know also that there's disparities. And that's partly why some people are looking at other outlets. Their studies have shown that there's disparities as to who get prescribed the medication.
Yes.
So, and these disparities are based on demographics such as race, does have an impact on who ends up getting prescribed these medications, despite their great outcome and benefit, especially when you talk about diabetic control and even the improvement of kidney function for those who are diabetic. So there's great benefits to them, but there are some concerns.
I'm having shortness of breath. It's really hard to catch my breath. And this sucks because I'm here all the way in Colombia and I really just want to give it my all. But I just feel awful. I just want it to go away. Thank you.
Are you feeling okay?
I can't catch my breath. It's very strange. Last time I felt like this, I had to go to the hospital. This is not going well. I can't even walk very much without losing my breath.
How you feeling? So kind of like, just want to make sure that you're feeling.
Last time I felt like this, I had to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Breathe again. What's happening, Mason?
I'm just tired.
You are taking some medicine that can affect your pancreas. Your pancreas can fail.
Okay. They suggested that I go to the hospital and get checked out. So I have no idea what's going to happen today.
There are concerns about the small, even though it's a small risk, there is a risk for pancreatitis.
Yes.
And that can vary depending on the medication, but it's overall really small, ranges, I think, between 0.5 to almost 2%, I think is the highest I've noticed, or maybe just a little bit above 1%. So it's a small risk, but it does exist. And for some people, that may be a deterrent. There's also a potential link, it hasn't been completely proven, but potential link for thyroid cancer. And while obesity itself is linked to 13 different types of cancer, for some individuals who may have their personal history of thyroid cancer, especially medullary cancer or family history, may not want to go on these medications. They are not necessarily the best candidates. Let's talk about also the fact that people are kind of using these medications as short-term solutions. Like, I want to fit into my wedding dress, so I'm going to use this medication. As you mentioned, Shannon, the real benefit on being on these medications is really long-term. But we have this new culture that's like, I'm going to take Victoria, for example, to go on vacation because I want to get into my swimsuit. You know, I want to get on Saxenda because I want to get married. I want to wear this particular wedding dress. What do you guys think about this growing culture of using these medication as a cosmetic option? Besides the fact
will happen.
that
It will happen.
it'll
And
happen.
especially like with that compounding and everything else, it will happen, and you will start to have deaths, and we'll start to have issues around it. And then there'll be more research as to whether or not it needs to be pulled from the market. Not to say that it's going to be
because these are
pulled
not
out.
necessarily people who are obese or overweight. You're right.
But it's also just the fact that they can.
Right.
We're in an environment where, you know, a lot of things are available as long as you're willing to pay for it. And so you're going to have a lot of that happening, and then there's going to be all the questions, because with a lot of medications, especially for things like weight loss that has come out through the years, and you know, we joked earlier about fen, but like those things were used by medical professionals in the beginning, and then they started to become abused and become, whether it's off market, definitely off label probably for most of them, but like just over the counter or something that you just bought. And now we have the abuse of it, and then now there's the scrutiny of it to say, well, what's going to happen next? Should we remove this from the market and totally get rid of it? So unfortunately, that's the route I see that's going with it, and it's not a good thing, but it's unfortunately the American way.
Yeah.
Sadly, Shannon, some people may be wondering, how do these medications actually work? I mean, they hear about
Sure.
GLP-1s, but how does a GLP-1 actually work?
Sure. So it mimics a hormone that naturally occurs in our body. It has several mechanisms. So one of the mechanisms is that it works in the brain, as we were discussing earlier. There's a lot of different brain receptor activity in obese individuals that differ from other people. So it kind of quiets that food noise for the people that it does work for. Another mechanism is that it slows gastric motility, meaning that it'll help the food move slowly through your digestive system. And so because of that, you'll feel fuller longer. And then another thing that it does is, you had mentioned the pancreatitis as possibly, you know, being a bad side effect. So it will tell your pancreas to produce more insulin. And insulin is important because it will move blood glucose out of your bloodstream into your cells to be used for energy. So there's different mechanisms as to how it works, but I think one of the main ones is that it really does work on people's brain receptors as far as quieting that side of the brain, as far as that food seeking behavior that a lot of obese people really do struggle with.
Is the sole factor as to why, because some people may be asking, why wouldn't it work in some people? Is it solely attributed to the fact that some people just don't respond to the medications, or are there other factors that may be playing a role as to why it doesn't work?
I don't know that we have all of the answers to it. I know for the people who may gain weight on it, one of the reasons may be because of that pancreas producing an abundance of maybe more insulin, and that person could actually be insulin resistant. So, insulin is an anabolic hormone, meaning that it promotes fat storage. So, if your pancreas is now producing more and more insulin, but you're resistant to insulin, you're going to then gain weight and store more fat. So, there's a lot of different scientific reasons for why it may not work for some people and others, and some of it just isn't necessarily known.
Yeah. And I would also add to that, I completely agree with you. And I would also add to that, that obesity is really a complex condition.
It really is.
Where there's so many
Yeah.
factors that feed into it, right? So, for example, we know high stress lifestyle can affect someone's weight. We know also that inadequate sleep, another epidemic we have in the United States, and the impact of insufficient sleep on the metabolism of individuals may have a role. The fact that we mentioned that people are not very active and being very sedentary or having prolonged sitting can be as dangerous as smoking. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. And sometimes also, as you mentioned, having underlying metabolic issues can definitely impact the success rate.
Is Ozempic the obesity cure? And the short answer to that is no. The obesity cure, as of right now, for people with severe obesity is still bariatric surgery, coupled with intensive behavioral therapy, coupled with lifelong follow-up with your healthcare team. That's your medical doctor, your dietitian, your mental health care team. And with the advances in technology, bariatric surgery, even though it still is risky, it's a surgery, it's comparable to having a hip replacement or your gallbladder removed. So it's shown up to 20 years later to keep that weight off, to lower blood pressure, and also to reduce or eliminate type 2 diabetes.
Yes, and that's I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I'm glad that you're highlighting also the long-term data in terms of bariatric surgery versus the GLP-1s. So, and if they want to find out a little more about how to live healthy, fun, happy lifestyle, how can they find you, Shannon?
Yes, so you can find me first, my website. So it's www.nutrished.net. Nutrished it's spelled Nutrished, but it's pronounced Nutrished. And it is a word that I made up. Basically, it's nutrition as a feeling. So I want you to be nutrished after you speak to me.
Oh, I
want you to be
come on with the marketing. Yes.
Love it.
You've been refreshed, and synonyms are you're refreshed, you're revitalized, you're energized. And we are a registered trademark, by the way. So yes, www.nutrished.
Don't come for her logo.
Don't come for it because it's taken. Okay. So www.nutrished.net. On social media platforms, so that's Fanbase, Instagram, and YouTube, it's nutrished.nutrition.
Awesome. And Dr. Trisa, if we want to get our muscle strengthening right, how can we get in touch with you?
You can find me at Instagram at trisajob.dpt.
I'm Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club right here on YouTube, and healthybump.club on Instagram. And don't forget to find us on Fanbase. We thank you guys for watching us. We thank you for hanging out. And we hope that we've answered the question for you when it comes to this obesity crisis. Are you being healthy? Are you exercising? If you want to figure out how you should exercise, check out our other videos, especially if you're pregnant. A good word for you guys to know is that these medications are not approved for pregnancy. So if you're on them, you want to make sure you get on your birth control. Okay. See y'all in the office. And we see you guys when? Next episode. And
Thank you for watching. Please comment, like, and share.